Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Today we'll be doing the lecture number 5 of the course. Up to date we discussed on the history of the Theravada tradition, how it evolved now, and its relationship with the Mahavihara tradition. And in the second lecture we discussed about the fundamentals, what is a fundamental and what is the philosophy beneath a certain fundamental, and then the importance of fundamentals. So now from today onwards we'll be directly discussing about the fundamentals themselves, and they'll be arranged in a certain manner. I have given a timetable, or means a list of the course, but sometimes it is prone to change, right? It will be not in a how to say drastic way, but a certain lectures can change up and down. Right? So don't take it as a serious timetable, but all the what I have mentioned in the handouts will be discussed for sure. So the topic today is called Theory of Ultimacy, explaining Buddhist literature, especially the Theravada literature. So before coming into this topic and going into the fundamentals, we have to understand what was the Buddha's approach in understanding the reality of the life. So normally when we study the Buddhism, we study from what he has taught us. But in his expedition of finding the truth, he came from observe the world, and he understood what really the world is. It means his first approach objective was to get rid of the suffering that every being, sentient being, is experiencing. Not to liberate all the beings, but to liberate the beings himself and most of the beings who are encountering suffering. So the suffering, what he meant was the repeatedly being born, aging and dying, and again getting birth, and this cycle of rebirth, birth and death keeps on happening. So he wanted to stop this. So this was his objective. So in order to stop this cycle of suffering, first thing he had to find was what really exists. So this is, if he wants to end up the suffering which is experienced by the beings, he has to find what really the world is, what is the life. Then how this reality of the life keeps on happening, how it proceeds. Like we see, this is like a flask, like we are born, we get old, we die, and we are born again. So this sort of process is going on. What is the causes of this existence? So he had to find the causes, or what is the relation of the really existing things to with each other, and why they keep on happening. So these two are necessary in order, if he wants to stop the suffering of the life. He is unable to do it if he doesn't understand what life is, and if he doesn't understand how life happens. So these two are must that he has to understand if he wants to stop the suffering of this world, of the life. Then he has to find out a liberation. So when we end up this suffering, what will happen? What will be attained? So we have to say the liberation. Normally we say the end of suffering. Then as a teacher, he has to find out a way to do it. A way to attain the liberation. So these are the four. I think all of you know about the Four Noble Truths. You have heard about it. So this is the basic idea of Four Noble Truths. First, you have to understand what exists, what are the causes. Then, what is the liberation? If we end up the suffering, will that liberation be forever, or is it just a permanent, temporary thing? So it has to be verified. Then there should be a way. So now, when we are talking about Buddhism today, most of the time in meditation teachers or the spiritual ones who advocate the spirituality, we talk about this one more. We give a more emphasis on this. For some people, Buddhism is only the way of practicing. They give very less attention to these three. But it is very logical. If you want to find a way to get liberated, first, anyone, not only the Buddha, anyone should understand what the life is and what the causes are. So it is very necessary that as a Buddhist, if someone wants to get liberated, he has to understand what really exists, what are the causes, and also he has to first learn how the practice is being done. So the way also he has to study and understand what the liberation is. So first we have to study or learn about these things, then we have to apply it into practice. So while we are studying, sometimes we as a people who study, scholars, we are unable to do this in a practical way because this is something which is personal. If the person wishes to get liberated, it's up to him to practice. So when we are studying, we focus on how this is happening, we try to understand it. So in a course like explaining the Buddhist practices, the Buddhist teachings, we mostly focus on the knowledge, but it's up to the person whether he practices and attains. And the next thing is, now in this course we'll be talking about all the four aspects, but in different manners. This is what the essence of the Buddha's teachings. But today we are going to understand what really exists. So this will be the highlighted point. So when the lecture keeps on going, this will go for 2 weeks. It means the 4 lectures. So when the lecture keeps on going, sometimes you will understand this is a very abstract reality, what we are talking about. It's like a philosophical class. But actually, we have to keep in our mind that even though we are talking about abstract reality, this is in the holistic picture of Buddhism. This is related for a liberation. Why the Buddha has preached this is not just for his intellectual preference or intellectual satisfaction. It is for the purpose of liberation and find a way to liberation. So if the liberation is true, if the way is correct, then what he understood as the reality has to be correct. So this is the approach of the Buddha. So what this course is not to prove Buddhism is correct, and this course is not to explain what all the schools advocate what as Buddhism, only about the Theravada tradition. So in this tradition, what is really existing and what are the causes for this existence and how the liberation is explained and what is the way, how it is attained. So these are the points that we'll be discussing. But to understand, even though this is 4 points, there will be few aspects that we have to clarify in order to understand them clearly. So first, in these 4 lectures, we are talking about what really exists. Right? So that's why the handout was given, the Theory of Ultimacy. And the next handout will be, it means not the next week, next week, we'll be talking about the causality. How this ultimacy is happening, is what is the causes for this. So also this, the theory of ultimacy, what really exists. Ultimate truth, we call it. And its conditionality. So these are in terms of explaining Buddhism, these seems like the 2 main pillars. So what really exists and how it happens. So if someone can understand these 2 points, he understands Buddhism, most of the parts of Buddhism. Then a matter of fact is how to understand the liberation and the way to attain liberation, which is also a practical aspect. Right? So if we go to the handout, I have given in numbers. So every chapter will have a number. So this is the first chapter. So all the numbers will start from number 1. So 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, likewise. So in the further lessons, I'll be referring to the previous chapters and I'll be only telling the number. So you'll be able to go to the back references very easily. So all the main points are given in numbers, right? And all the points that I want to highlight, I have given in bold letters. So the first thing is the word paramattha. That's the first point we have to understand, paramattha. So this word paramattha is normally explained as ultimate, translated as ultimate. When we say ultimate, it means I'll use it as an adjectival verb, as an adjective. So it means something which has the sense of existing. So the existing nature of existence. So in the lecture I'll be using few words. One word is existence. Existent. So here existent normally in English is an adjective which referring to something which exists. So in the course I'll be using this as an adjective and also as a noun. So I'll be using like existent, it means something that exists, and existence, something that things that exist. So this will be the usage of this word in this course. Then I'll be using another word called existing. I'll explain it when it comes to that point, right? So the idea of existing means it exists, means it can be found. So the things that Buddha explained as existing, as explained in the Theravada tradition, are something that can be found, experienced, and be proved by our mind. So it is not something that is beyond our experience. For example, some Greek philosophers, they said the truth of the world, like for example, I have given the name like Anaximenes. So Anaximenes said that the truth of the world is something that is beyond our experience. So, but the truth in explaining the Buddha's theory is not such a reality that is beyond our experience. So there are, if you go to the 1.2, it says that these truths can be experienced most empirically observed. So they can be observed empirically. So when I say empirically means, it doesn't mean only the five senses. So it includes the observation done by senses and also observation done by intellect, with the sixth sense. So all these are addressed as empirical observation in this course. So most of the ultimate realities can be empirically observed. Some are known through inference. So these points will come in these further lectures. What are the realities that are understood through inference? Then some are experienced and attained with certain means. So this is a certain kind of a state, and some only with spiritual development. So there are four ways the realities can be known: through direct experience, through inference, and by attaining by certain means. And some states are attained only through spiritual development, not through normal means, right? So we will come to these points. So what I want to emphasize is existence. Existence, explaining Buddhist theory, is something that can be known by the beings. Then 1.3 explains the Theravadians advocate that the existence, that what really exists, are independent of an observer. It means there is a school called Yogacara I have given in the footnotes. They advocated a theory that whatever we experience is just something happens in our mind. But unlike them, Theravadians held to the idea that existence exists or are found independent of the observer. Whether we observe or not, it doesn't matter, existence do exist. But next point I want to say is, when I say existence, it doesn't mean that everything exists forever. No. It will be clear when the lecture goes further. So existence means something that can be verified with our wisdom, with our senses, or sometimes with the attainment of a spiritual development. So then we come to the 1.4. So there are four ways to verify a paramattha. Paramattha means ultimate thing, ultimate existing natures. There are four ways explained by teachers. So these four ways can be found in the canon, but not directly mentioned as four ways, but you can fetch the idea. So first thing is pariññākicca in Pali. It means if something is existent, it should be known, it should have its own intrinsic nature or the universal characteristics. Intrinsic characteristic or universal characteristic. It means if something exists, it should have its own existence by its own. It doesn't mean it exists. It doesn't mean when I say something exists in its own, it doesn't mean that it is out of conditions, but its existence, it's itself. So it means something, if it is to be existent, if something has its nature or intrinsic nature or universal nature, this should be considered as an existing thing, existing reality. Then the 1.42 says, the second way to verify it, if something can be developed. Something can be developed means the capacity of certain realities can be intensified. This is normally applied to spiritual faculties like a concentration, wisdom, morality. These things can be intensified if we keep on developing them. So first of all, if something to be developed, it should possess the capacity, it should possess this ability. For that, it should exist in the first place. So therefore, if something can be developed, it is considered as existent. Then third one is, if something can be eradicated or removed, that is also considered as something existing. Then the last one is attainable. If something is attainable, it has to be experienced through mind and body. So this is also considered as existing. I'm going in a bit of rush, because these points will be, when we come to the real topics, I'll be taking time and explaining them in detail. So this is like an introduction to the paramattha's. Even I explain at this moment these points, they'll be, it will be difficult to explain. So this till number 1.6, so this is like an introduction to paramattha. So up to now we discussed a paramattha in Theravada tradition can be experienced. It's not something that is beyond our experience, and it is something which is independent of our observation. And there are 4 ways that the teachers have suggested to verify a certain if something is a paramattha or not. If these 4 ways, 4 modes, if any reality fits to be verified in any of these 4 modes, that is considered as a paramattha. It doesn't mean that every paramattha or every existent has to be verified in all these 4 modes. No. If it's something fits to be verified by any of the modes, it is considered as a paramattha or ultimate entity. Right? Then we come to 1.5. Mainly paramattha can be classified into 2 groups. So these are the main classification. We normally call saṅkhata and asaṅkhata. Saṅkhata and asaṅkhata. Saṅkhata means something which depends on conditions. Asaṅkhata means something does not depend on conditions. So when we say depend on condition, it means certain existence, it means realities, what will exist, have to depend on conditions for its arising, for its persisting, and sometimes to remain in the mind stream. That's what it says in the 1.51. An existence that depends upon other existence for its existence. So it existent, that is what you call what exists, there's our realities, that depends upon other existence. It means they depend on other realities. So for its existence is called a saṅkhata paramattha. It will be explained more detail further in the next line. Such an existent either arises and persists. Arises means comes into appearance and it remains, or remains unabandoned due to other existence. So these points will be clarified in the further of this lesson. So saṅkhata means, the first thing we have to understand is some realities do need the support of other realities for its existence, for its remaining. And when we come to asaṅkhata, unconditioned paramattha, an existence that does not depend upon other existence for its existence is called an asaṅkhata. It means some realities doesn't need the support of other realities for its existence. Right? So this is the 2 classifications. In some doctrines, some teachers in other schools, they start the explanation of paramattha in this manner, saṅkhata and asaṅkhata. Now we come to today's main part of the lecture. So 1.6, the saṅkhata paramattha are fourfold. There are 4 types of saṅkhata paramattha as can be found, fetched from the Theravada doctrine. Paramatthadhamma. So when I say use the word paramattadhamma, throughout this course, I'll be referring to the conditioned realities. So normally you study, when we say paramattha, it comprises saṅkhata and asaṅkhata, conditioned and unconditioned. But in this lecture, I'm only focusing on saṅkhata, conditioned realities. Then we have another 3 types of saṅkhata paramatthas. Upadino dhamma. I haven't given the translation because they will be explained in detail. Then anupanna dhamma. Then paramattha jatika. So these 4 types of ultimate realities, ultimate entities are considered as conditioned. So all are necessary to explain how the world, the life is happening as we experience today. Right? These are very important. But normally in our Abhidhamma studies, in most of the places, we study only 1 point. It means we study 1.61. Paramatthadhammas is what has been emphasized in today's Abhidhamma studies. We normally neglect Upadino Dhamma, Anupanna Dhamma and Paramattha Jatika. But when the lecture goes, you will understand how important they are to explain the existence of the world. So without the explanation of these 3, actually the Nibbana, the value of Nibbana, how the practice can be verified, these things cannot be explained logically if these last 3 are not understood properly. So what I want to say is, I'll emphasize this point again. Today's normal studies of Abhidhamma is mostly focused on these Paramatthadhammas. But this Paramatthadhamma is just the one part of the conditioned realities. If we don't study the remaining 3, or especially the last 2, Anupanna and Paramattha Jatika, we cannot get a holistic picture what the Buddha intended to explain as preserved in the Theravada tradition. Right? So today now we go into the lesson of Paramatthadhamma. So if we draw it, before explaining it, if we draw a chart, it's like so if we say the paramattha, so this is divided as saṅkhata and asaṅkhata. And this is fourfold as Paramatthadhamma. And we have Upadino Dhamma. And we have Anupanna Dhamma. Then we have Paramattha Jatika. This asaṅkhata, according to the tradition, is explained as 5-fold. Right? I'll be discussing them in the next week. These 5-fold asaṅkhata. So this is the normal, how to say, tree for paramattha's. Right? As you can find in the Theravadian literature. There are some other points that we'll be discussing related to paramattha, not direct paramattha, related to paramattha. Paramattha means the existence. So these, they will be not considered as paramattha, but related to paramattha. That also I'll be explaining next week. We'll be discussing on next week. We'll be discussing. So what I want to emphasize, one point I wanted to emphasize was today's Abhidhamma studies normally are focused only at this point and also the last 2 of the asaṅkhata. But if you go into the doctrine means the canon, commentaries, sub-commentaries, you find a huge range of paramattha's have been addressed that we don't talk much these days, about much these days. Udah tiga. So we'll go to the page number 3, 1.7, Paramatthadhammas. So Paramatthadhammas, when I say Paramatthadhammas, these are the conditioned realities. What does it mean by conditioned reality? It needs the support of other realities for its arising, for its existing, persisting, and also some realities need the support of other realities to remain unabandoned. This remaining unabandoned, it will come in the next next week. Here we are talking about Paramatthadhammas that need the support of other realities for its arising and for its persisting. Persisting means after reality has arisen, it remains for a certain period of time and then passes away. This is a very famous fundamental in Buddhist teachings. During this period of existing, it still needs the support of others. Right? That is what is meant by saṅkhata. So if something to be considered as a paramattadhamma, there is a definition for that. For this definition I have given in 1.7, but unfortunately I have to correct it. There is some mistake in this definition. So I'll be writing it on the board. Please correct it. This 1.7 definition has to be corrected. A reality that arises as a separate nature in its intrinsic characteristic, but together with other natures, similar natures, is called paramattha. This is the definition. Sorry for that, there's a mistake. So this 1.7 should be changed. A reality that arises as a separate nature in its intrinsic characteristic, but together with other similar realities, is called a paramattadhamma. So why do I use the word but? Because in the first part of the definition it says as a separate ultimate reality. This separate doesn't mean it arises alone. It arises together. But even they arise together, there is a separation between the realities. So that is an important point that we have emphasized. So even though it arises separately, but it arises together. Here separately means in a group of realities that arises, there is a characteristic that by which we can define them as separate entities. So now that is what I'm going to emphasize. So a thing to be considered as a paramattadhamma, there are especially two characteristics in this definition. Something has to have its own intrinsic nature. Own intrinsic nature means that has its characteristic that can be experienced or that can be proven with our wisdom, and then it has to happen. That characteristic we should be able to separate it from others. It means a unique. If we say two ultimate realities, they have different characteristics. So we call it a separate reality. And the next thing is when they arise, they don't arise alone. They arise together in clusters. So this is the two main definitions for a paramattadhamma. For instance, I have given the examples. We have, if you take the two paramatthas explained in tradition, vijnana and Paඨavi. So when we say vijnana is the consciousness. It has the characteristic of knowing an object. It is the function of vijnana. So when vijnana arises, it arises in a group of realities. Together with it, we call it vijnana arises with cetasika. Vijnana arises with cetasikas. Right? So vijnana has its own intrinsic nature of knowing an object. But the associating chetasikas also have their own intrinsic natures. For example, if we take the Vedana, it has the nature of experiencing the flavor of the object. If we take the Lobha, it has the nature of attaching to something. If we take the Moha, it has the nature of not knowing the true nature of the object. So likewise, even though these Vijnana and Chetasikas arise together, they have their own intrinsic nature. So they are separate entities. But they happen in a cluster. They happen in a cluster. So the next point is, now Vijnana and Chetasikas can be differentiated. Even they arise together, they can be differentiated because of their intrinsic natures, different intrinsic natures. So then the question comes, how a Vijnana is separate from another Vijnana? Do we advocate that the one Chitta consciousness exists within a being for all the time? No. Consciousness arises and passes away. So how do we differentiate one consciousness from another consciousness? Because it has its own arising. It means when we say Vijnana plus Chetasikas, this kind of arisings happens again and again. So this cluster has its own arising and this cluster has its own arising. So how do we differentiate a Vijnana from another Vijnana which has the same intrinsic characteristic, that is based on their different arising? But in a cluster, they arise together. We normally don't say that in a cluster, Vijnanas arising and Chetasikas arising are different. No. The cluster arises together. They have one arising. So this one arising, in this one arising of clusters which have the same arising, how they are differentiated? Because of their different intrinsic natures. But then the question comes, if the Vijnana is another Vijnana which has a similar intrinsic nature, how do we differentiate them? Because they have two different arising. Different arising means different in time or maybe different in location. For example, we say the Patavi. Patavi is hardness. Hardness arises with three other realities like Tejo, Patavi, Tejo, Apo, Vayu. They arise in a cluster. Hardness arises in a cluster. So this nature of hardness, nature of Apo, we will be discussing in the chapter under Rupa, which will be in another few weeks. So here we are focusing about this characteristic of paramattha. It has a quality of hardness. Other three material elements like heat, cohesion, and pushing nature, they have their own intrinsic nature. At the same, so they can be differentiated from each other based on their intrinsic quality. And the next thing is this whole cluster has a one arising. Then another group of clusters like Patavi and the remaining three has a different arising. Sometimes regarding the Rupa, they may arise at the same time, but they happen in a different location. So therefore, the Patavi of one cluster is different from the Patavi of another cluster because they have a separate arising. They arise in separate locations or they arise in separate times. So therefore, a paramattadhamma is something that is separate from others. We can separate it. How do we separate it? Based on their intrinsic nature or based on their different arising from other similar paramattadhamma. So that is the first definition, how we explain 1.7. Then we go to the 1.8. So if I read the 1.8, paramattadhammas are empirically observable and are observed by every sentient being. That is the next point. It's not like something that is hidden. Paramatthas are not things that are hidden. Paramatthas, the ones that are visible, that are audible, or that we experience day-to-day life. But what happens? When we experience these paramattas, the ultimate existence, our mind tend to think about them in different ways. That's the problem. Buddhism doesn't say the reality is something beyond our experience. No. Reality is what we experience. It's a very simple thing. It's not something very, have to be understood with intellectual or deep thinking. But what happens is, our mind, when we experience this reality, our mind tend to observe them or tend to consider them in different ways. And then we develop certain concepts while we experience the reality. So then what happened? Based on these concepts, the reality will be covered. So what we have to do according to the Buddha's teachings to understand the reality, it's something that we have to change the perception of our mind. It's not going to change the outside world. So instead of developing the strange concepts If we just try to observe the reality as it is, without letting the mind develop the concepts, we are able to experience the reality. So a reality is not something which is beyond our senses, beyond our intellect. When we experience sense, the problem is our minds tend to create something that is not real. We normally call these concepts. So therefore, paramattha and concepts are two words that comes together. We normally call it panyati in Pali. Panyati is concepts. Panyati is concept. So the thing is, in 1.8, what I want to emphasize is Paramatthadhammas are empirically observed and intellectually known. So with sensories and intellectual ability. Panyati and concept, right? It's given in the 1.8. The word is given. These considerations are the concepts. Actually, it's called Artha Panyati. There are two types of Panyati. Panyati of meaning, Panyati of name, right? Panyati of name is something which is very, what we name. It doesn't affect us much. What affects is the Artha Panyati that is created by our mind. For example, when we see this, we normally call this a chair. This chair, according to the theory of Buddhist theory, Theravada theory, what exists here is the four ultimate, rupas, is the Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayu. So they do exist. When we observe it, we see the color which is also ultimate reality. But what happens? Based on the appearance, how it appears, we tend to think about something which is called chair, which doesn't exist in the reality. So what is actually what we see when we touch, what we experience in the ultimate reality, in the hardness. When we touch, we feel the hardness. When we touch, we feel the heat. When we look at it, we see the color. So we experience the ultimate reality in its pure nature. But what happens is, our minds tend to think, taking these ultimate realities as one thing, and we tend to think this is something can call a chair, or something which is a thing upon which we can sit. That is true, because it can happen. We can sit on it. But actually there is no such a substance, one thing called a chair. So what happens is, we experience the ultimate reality, but we construct certain concepts based on how they appear to our mind. So this is the point I want to emphasize in 1.8. So when we go to 1.9, Paramatthadhammas are the irreducible natures of the empirical world. It means now, I say that we normally experience the paramattha's, but normally our minds create certain concepts based on that. So then how to say, we live in a world of concepts. Why? Our mind actually lives in a world of a concept. Actually we live in a world of ultimate realities. What we experience is the ultimate realities. But while we construct certain concepts, so what we deal, we always try to live based on our concepts. So what happens is, to come into the ultimate reality, what we have to think is, we have to stop this creation of concepts. We have to stop the creation of concepts. So in order to stop this creation, we are asked to analyze these concepts that we create in our mind. So that is what is called analysis. So in Buddhist analysis, what the concept that we create in our mind have to be analyzed. So for example, this chair is a concept that we take in our mind. So we are asked to divide it, intellectually separate it. This separation is not a physical separation. If we go in the physical separation, there is a limit that we can reach according to the Buddhist theory. So this has to be a pure intellectual analysis. So in this intellectual analysis, if we divide the parts of the chair, we may get a bunch of wood. So then the question comes, is the wood is the chair? If the wood is chair, whatever way it is bundled, it should be called a chair. But the same wood, using the same wood, instead of making something called a chair, if we arrange it in a separate, different way, we may call it a table. So therefore, wood is not the chair, wood is neither the table, neither the chair nor the table. It is how it is placed in the space, we get an idea of a chair, or we get an idea of a table. So then comes, does the wood exist? Then the wood can be also be separated into particles. We can go till the atoms. So then we go into the level of the atom, or the level of the electron protons in the scientific way, whatever material thing that we can reach, physically dividing. And then this material thing, according to the Theravadians, is also contains a certain substance. So therefore the material thing that can be reached physically is also not an ultimate reality. So they say this physical thing contains a certain hardness, it has a certain kind of a heat, then a cohesion to hold it in one place, and certain kind of a pushing nature. I'll be talking about this in detail about rupa. So what I want to say is, in this analysis of Artha Panyati, what is reached at the end, at the final stage, is called the Paramatthadhamma. It means when we reach to a certain stage, we come into a level that we cannot further analyze it anymore. Hardness cannot be analyzed into its components. Hardness is not something made out of, it's not a thing that is made out of something. So likewise, in this analysis, the finally reached thing is called paramattha. In other words, something that is not subject to intellectual analysis is called a paramattha. Something which is subject to intellectual analysis is called a panyati. So this is the second nature. So in 1.8, I want to emphasize paramattha are observed in our normal day-to-day life. But what happens is we construct a certain concept, so the paramattha gets revealed to us, it gets covered to us. Then how to decide a paramattha? In a practical aspect, whatever the concepts we construct in our mind, like a chair, person, mother, father, house, we have to analyze in terms of intellectual analysis. So in this analysis, what is reached at the end, which is not subject to analysis anymore, is something called a paramattha. So that is what it says in the page, that same 1.9 paragraph, the last line. In the process of intellectual analysis of a particular object, the finally reached nature of datum that cannot be further reduced into its constitutions is called a paramattha. In other words, natures that are not made out of any other substance is called a paramattha. So what it means, Paramatthadhammas are which have their own intrinsic natures and that cannot be divided any further. Right? So then, Artha Panyati, the concepts are subject to analysis. Then a question may come, another point that I want to emphasize. We say, based on the ultimate realities, concepts are constructed. Concepts are constructed in our mind. They are not constructed in the outside world. It means, when the four elements come together, they appear in this manner. So when we call it a chair, when we analyze the chair, we get the four elements. Then a common man can ask a question, is the chair created, constructed by the four elements? No. Chair is never constructed by the four elements. Chair is something we construct in our mind, looking at the appearance of the four elements. So even at this level, while we experience, it is the four elements that exist in a certain manner in the space. It's not they never create so paramattha never creates the panyati. Panyati is not made out of paramattha. This has to be very clearly understood. Panyati is something we create in our mind. So therefore, in Buddhist teachings, what is outside world, what we experience is the paramattha. So panyati is something that we create in our mind. So then we go to 1.1, 1.10. Paramatthadhammas are twofold, and nama and rupa. So nama is mentalities. So normally we say chitta, vijnana, manasa. So nama is twofold as chitta, cetasika. So there are some synonyms for chitta, vijnana, mano, manasa, which is one type of mentality. This is explained in 89 or 121 in Theravada Abhidhamma. Cetasika are 52 in number. In different traditions, we have different numbers of cetasikas. Then rupa is which are 18 in number, because 18 are the ultimate realities, right? So then we come into 1.11, 12, 13. These three are also very important in terms of understanding Paramatthadhammas. What does it say? Paramatthadhammas are mere natures or qualities that are existent. That are existent, it means that really exist. In the Theravada tradition, they are not things or substances that consumes a space and has a shape like atoms, electrons, protons, so forth. So the next point Theravadians emphasize is they are just natures like hardness, like heat. They don't consume a space like consciousness, knowing. These are actions. So but in the corporeality, what happened? These qualities, when they come together, I will be talking about this in Rupa chapter in detail. When these qualities come together, they appear like they spread or they start to exist in a certain space. So then we understand as they consume a space when they come together. What does mean by consuming a space? These qualities starts to exist in a certain area of the space. So then we get something called a thing. So when we get a thing, like for example, we take an atom. This thing means the four qualities exist in this range of space, area of space. So we say it consumes a space. But when we divide an atom intellectually, we find four qualities. The quality doesn't have a shape. The quality itself doesn't consume a shape, it consumes a space. What happens is quality exists in a certain range. So then it appears as a thing which consumes the space. So therefore, in the Theravada tradition, paramattas are just natures. They are just qualities. That's the next point. Then we come to 1.12. Each paramattadhamma has its unique intrinsic nature or characteristic. So it has its unique intrinsic nature. And when we go to 1.30, it also has sub-natures. So we have intrinsic main natures, basic, we call it basic natures. Basic characteristic. Then we have sub-characteristics. Right, sub-characteristics. For example, we take about the cetasika, moha. Moha has its nature of not knowing an object. That is, it's how to say. We take, for example, we take a chitta. Chitta's nature is knowing an object, right? Knowing an object. And then we also say some chittas have the quality of giving good results. Some chittas have the quality of giving bad results. This is also a quality of the chitta. So therefore, the intrinsic nature of chitta is knowing an object. Their sub-natures are explained by the Buddha. Some have sub-natures like giving good results, giving bad results, like forth. So therefore, we have to understand, if we want to understand the paramattadhamma, first we have to know its intrinsic nature. And also the doctrine says some sub-natures of this reality. The next point is, not only a characteristic, a paramattadhamma also has functions. So we have basic characteristics, sub-characteristics. At the same time, we have basic functions and sub-functions. So when we take, for example, if we take a cetasika called moha, moha is the basic function is to cover the truth to the mind. That is the basic function explained in the doctrine. But also it has sub-functions like fettering the beings with the samsara, not giving the opportunity for the kusala to happen, or sometimes overwhelming our mind. So these kind of sub-functions are explained. So the point is, paramattadhammas have their basic characteristics and also basic functions. In addition to that, the doctrine the Buddha has explained, certain paramattadhammas have sub-characteristics and sub-functions. That is what it says in paragraph number 1.13 and 1.12 and 1.13, right? 1.12 and 1.13. So then, when we combine, in 1.14 I say, these 1.11, 12 and 13, when they are combined, we can come into this kind of a conclusion. Paramatthadhamma is not a thing that bears its intrinsic characteristic. There is no duality between the paramattadhamma and its intrinsic nature. There is no dichotomy. Dichotomy means the duality, nature of duality, doctrine of duality. Dichotomy which distinguishes the reality from its nature, the bearer and the borner. So it means, for example, we say in the 1.11 we say they are just qualities. They just doesn't consume a space, or they doesn't have a shape. And also we say they have a basic characteristic and sub-characteristics. They all, and basic function and sub-functions, they all are focusing on just natures. They are focusing on these natures. So normally we say, when we say, in our definitions, we say Patavi has the characteristic of Patavi hardness. So we normally say characteristic of Patavi is hardness. Right. So when we, according to this sentence, grammatically, characteristics of Patavi, hardness is the characteristic of Patavi, he said. So here it seems like Patavi is something which is with hardness. But according to the Theravada tradition, hardness and Patavi are the same thing. That's the point I want to emphasize. Hardness and Patavi are the same thing. This grammatical definition is for the sake of easy convenience to facilitate the convenience understanding of the meaning. It's just when we say Patavi has the characteristic of hardness, it doesn't mean Patavi is one thing or hardness is one thing. Patavi and hardness are the same thing. So there's no duality about the reality and the characteristic. Reality itself is the characteristic. So that is what, when we combine these fundamentals, we can come into this idea. So thing is, they don't have a shape, they don't consume any space, and the characteristic itself is the reality, and there's no duality between the characteristic and the reality. So the final, to conclude this lecture, I go to 1.15. So we normally, up to now, we said paramattadhammas are the things that can be verified with our experience, and it is something that we experience in day-to-day life. But our mind starts to get away from this ultimate experience, and we construct our concepts to, in a practical aspect. If you want to understand the reality, what we have to do is analyze the concepts that we have in our mind. In easy analysis, what we reach at the end is the ultimate reality, which is irreducible any further. The next thing is, these ultimate realities that we discuss in Buddhism are just natures. Reality and the nature are the same thing. There is no duality in it, and then they don't have a shape, or they are not things. They are just natures. They have sub-natures, basic functions, sub-functions. So these are the characteristics of Paramatthadhammas. So how do we say? Now even some Buddhist scholars, they tend to say that these kind of existing natures are later creations which happen mainly in the Theravadian tradition. So how do we know? Some say the Buddha never explained such an existing quality in his doctrine about which something exists like as we are explaining today. So to my understanding, the Buddha has, explain this existing nature in direct ways. For example, if we give few examples, in some suttas, many suttas, Buddha say normally, rupam, dukkam, for example. Rupam dukkam, Vedana dukkha. Vedana dukkha. So in Pali grammar, according to Pali grammar or any Sanskrit grammar in ancient India, so we know that these two words, rupa and dukkha, it ends with a nigahita, dukkam. Here it ends with a long R, Vedana dukkha. Why is it? Because dukkha is used here as an adjective. So when this is adjective, this is in apposition. Apposition means the same, referring to the same thing. In grammatically, when we say apposition, the two words are in apposition means they refer to the same thing. So here, in the rupam and dukkam, in Pali grammar or Sanskrit grammar, if you use the same nominal case ending, it means these two words are referring to the same thing. So Vedana and Dukkha, they are referring to the same thing. So when we Buddha say Rupam Dukkam or Vedana Dukkha, it means he was referring, Rupa is one kind of paramattadhamma according to his idea. Vedana is existent. So this existent of Rupa and Vedana is suffering. Suffering means it causes suffering. So this explanation shows that Rupa and Dukkha are the same thing. Why it's using two words? These two words emphasize the nature of Rupa and nature of Dukkha are found in the same thing in the same reality. So these explanations can be found in many places. Vedana and Dukkha are the same form. Then what happens? Some scholars say, even though Buddha explained like this, the Buddha never advocated the existence of such things. So if you go to the Achela Kassapa Sutta, which is given in the handout, 1.15, second paragraph, in the Achela Kassapa Sutta, Buddha was questioned by Acharya Kassapa. He asked many questions. Is the suffering created by others? Is suffering created by by one's own? Buddha always negated. No, I don't say like that. In the end, he asked the question: is there a suffering? Means he asked the question: is the suffering created by yourself? He said, I don't say like that. Is suffering created by someone else? I say, I don't say like that. Then he asked the question: is there a suffering? He asked. In the end, he asked, is there a suffering? You are saying it, I don't say like this and this. Is there a suffering? He said, yeah, there is a suffering. So he says the suffering does exist. There is atti dukkam. There is suffering. Suffering there is means he propounded the existence of a dukkha. So dukkha means what he refers is the rupa, or what he refers is the vedana. It means the 5 aggregates. So these 5 aggregates are what is explained in his handout in 1.10. 1.10 we say rupa and nama and rupa are the things that are explained as the 5 aggregates. Like 5 aggregates are nama rupa, ayatana, nama rupa, so they are the synonymous. So therefore, according to our understanding, this nature of existence was expounded by the Buddha himself. So the finally to conclude the class, conclude the lecture, so that I'll go to the 1.7. I remind the definition again. What is the Paramatthadhamma? Paramatthadhamma has its own intrinsic nature, and then it has own intrinsic nature which can be separated from other natures, and it has an arising. So these are called saṅkhata paramattahas. I'll take the break and I'll go to the next lecture. I'll be explaining more further characteristics of Paramatthadhamma. Yes. Yes. 1.7. Yes.
Between the two examples you given, Vijnana and Cetasika, because Vijnana, although it arises different times, but the nature of Vijnana just to take the object,
yes.
And because of the Cetasika, so the nature is different. So we differentiate the nature of Cetasika, not the nature of Vijnana, right? The first example.
Yeah.
Vijnana and Cetasika.
Yeah, they arise together.
They arise together. But it's different because of arising the time.
No. What I want to say is, when the chitta and cetasika arise together, in this cluster, chitta has its own intrinsic nature, cetasikas have their own intrinsic nature. Even within the cluster, we can differentiate them. Then the question can come about how about another chitta? Because two chittas have the same intrinsic nature. So, in Buddhist perspective, do we consider these both chittas are same or not? So, in the Buddhist perspective, we say they are different. Why is different? Because if their intrinsic nature is the same, because if we give only the definition as they have separate their own intrinsic nature, in a one cluster we can easily understand, yes, chitta and cetasika have different intrinsic nature, so they are different realities. Then a question may come, another chitta arises, which has the same intrinsic nature of this chitta. So do they, in Buddhist philosophy, do we consider them as two things or one thing? We consider they have two realities. Why is that? Because they have separate arisings. So in terms of a paramattadhamma, we have to explain it in two manners. With its unique characteristic and with its unique arising. Arising means, if I say arising, existing and passing away also. That's the point I want to emphasize.
So we differentiate just the unique intrinsic nature.
Unique intrinsic nature. And how do we differentiate two natures which have the same intrinsic nature? Right? It's based on the different arising. Yeah, different arising means first chitta arise, pass away, next chitta arise. So first chitta has a different arising, second chitta has a different arising. Different arising means they happen in different times. In terms of rupa, they happen in different locations. So they have different arisings.
Just mentioned to the arising is different, but the intrinsic nature is
Intrinsic nature is same. Yeah, intrinsic nature is same.
So the same with Batavi and the other three dhatu, although different, but the nature of Batavi, although it arises in anything, is just the same.
Same. But they are two realities.
Yes.
Patami in one cluster and Patami in another cluster are two.
Yes.
Why? They are same in the nature. Why they are two different realities? Because they arise separately. Right? Yeah. If anyone has questions, we can discuss one or two. Okay. So then we'll take the break and we'll start at 2:45.